Hey you, come, gather around the campfire, and welcome to the party. This is Party Chat, a JRPG podcast where we talk about everything we love in the world of JRPGs and other Eastern titles. I am your host Cameron Hawkins. Along, as always, is my party partner Kevin Kenson. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good today. I was sick for a little bit, but I'm bouncing back pretty quickly, thankfully. So, kind of sucked for a couple days, but back at it. How about you? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I just got done doing a different podcast, which will be up at a later time. I guess it's like it can be a housekeeping thing of sorts. Where I just went on the JRPG Pursuit podcast with the cool crew over there. The episode goes up on Wednesday. So for those that are listening to this episode or review, the day it comes up, you have to wait a couple of days, but you can go to the JRPG Pursuit YouTube channel, and there'll be an episode where I'm on and we'll talk about a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, outside of that, I'm doing good. I'm chilling. It's Sunday, and so it's been a pretty quiet weekend. Did you do anything exciting this weekend?
Be sick, pretty much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just being sick boy.
Yesterday was a blur. I've caught up on playing some things. Been playing a couple games. Diving between FF7 Rebirth and Pirate Yakuza. So just been
Yeah,
playing a bunch of stuff. But other than that, yeah, I was just out of my head for like 2 days, and I'm a person again today. So just in time for us to record.
yay!
Yay!
Yeah. We'll talk about Pirate Yakuza and Rebirth later this week. But for now, we're here to talk about Monster Hunter Wilds. I have fortunately been able to play it early. I have I've rolled credits, which that's a whole thing we can get to soon.
Yeah. What does
Took
that
me
mean to be finished with a Monster Hunter game, right?
yeah,
Like.
exactly.
You already
But
put in
it took
3,000 hours? Wow, that was impressive.
it took me about 17 hours to hit the credits for this game. But before we get into the nitty and gritty of that, we do have a little bit of housekeeping. If you've been enjoying the show, please take a moment to pause the podcast and give us a 5-star review on your platform of choice, whether that be Spotify, Apple, what have you. You can also go to youtube.com and search our Party Chat channel, and which, because I don't think we have like a / Party Chat yet. We have to have a certain number of subscribers yet still, but just search in Party Chat, a JRPG podcast, and just give us a subscribe. That helps. It gives us exposure, eventually hoping to like monetize, which helps even more with exposure. It'd be a big help. You can also support us by going to patreon.com, and you can subscribe to a bunch of different tiers that give a bunch of perks, like getting our weekly episode a day early, monthly Q&A, and Campfire Catalog, which is our book club podcast, which we are doing on Chrono Trigger. And yeah, and then if you want to be a realist one, equally real one, go to youtube.com/Kevin Kenson and give Kevin some love over there. Give him a sub, as he's trying to get to 1 million subs before the end of the year. Be really appreciated.
It would be. Thank you very much.
But yes, I have explored the wilds of Monster Hunter Wilds, and I'm very curious about how this game is going to be received. As someone, we both saw this game at SGF, and I think for a lot of people it was the best, if not one of the best things that people saw there. And I was super duper excited for this game, and this probably is sounding like I'm going to end up having like a negative overall negative review for this game. That is not the case. I think this is a great game. However, I think it's I do not think it is a better game than Monster Hunter World. I think that there's a lot of things in the gameplay and general minute-to-minute experience that was streamlined in a way that does make things like quicker, less time consuming,
Streamlined. Yeah.
and easier, but it also got rid of aspects of that game that I thought added to the monster hunting experience that's no longer there. And but I also think that the gameplay has, like, the general combat and the use of the weapons, that aspect of it has been improved to varying degrees depending on what weapon you're using, right? It depends on what you're using.
Sure.
I played throughout the game using the bow, and I've had a great time using it. And we can get into that in a sec. Kevin, it looks like you have a question for me already.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of to give people an idea of where you're coming from on this too. Do you want to kind of just briefly touch on your history with the series, like maybe like which ones you played, where you started at?
Yeah.
Maybe like what has been your favorite so far?
Yeah, so I started with World, and World is my favorite. I played Rise. I enjoyed Rise for what it is. I did really like the wire bug mechanic that they introduced. That is not present in Wilds. I wouldn't even say that they swapped it out with this new like grappling hook, but that you are equipped with this grappling hook of sorts. But it doesn't do. It's not a 1-for-1 on the things that you could do with the wire bug in Rise. And yeah, when I played World for the first time, and I think like that's a big part of like how I'm going to talk about this game is like just comparing it to my experiences with the other Monster Hunter games, and how they compare and contrast. When I played World for the first time, there was this kind of like sense of wonder, and maybe this is because it was my first Monster Hunter game, to be clear. There was a sense of wonder exploring all these new areas that I don't really feel in Wilds because everything is so streamlined. So basically, like how the structure of the Wilds game is for those that didn't play the beta, you basically are going to this new area of sorts that was supposed to be like uninhabitable. There were like no like supposed to be creatures and stuff, and like that isn't the case. Like, and you end up like saving this young boy named Nata, and you end up like the whole kind of story of this game is getting him home to his people. And so as you progress through this game, like there's no real loading screens unless you decide that you want to like quick travel to somewhere. You can move basically more, if I remember correctly, place to place without having the need to like quick travel. It's all kind of like, it's kind of seamless, kind of. And so you start in the desert area, which is the section that we were shown off at SGF. And when we saw that demo, I think that, respectfully, I think that Capcom did a really good job at showing off things, really cool things about that game that very infrequently happen.
Sure. It's a lot of like storm scenario type stuff.
Yeah, like where we see like the sandstorm come in, and then it's just like lightning's raining down, and then like the radar, which is like the lightning dragon or wyvern of sorts, shows up, and like those kind of aspects that made it feel like, wow, this feels like next level Monster Hunter. That happened maybe 2 times throughout the 16 hours I've played of this game. And that feels bad to me as something that like felt like such a big big point of like big marketing point, for lack of a better term, of this game. And so that was a little upsetting. And in general, like, not not in its entirety, but a lot of this game, a lot of the map, the layout is really flat. It's really like there's not a whole lot of verticality in the worlds, like the regions. They're split into regions. These region designs, and if they do go up or they do go down, you're basically just going up or down some sort of ramp. It's not like in because I felt like in World I was like climbing stuff consistently. I was doing a lot more like on ground movement, while in this game it's a lot of like you get on your secret and your secret will take you to the monster. And that's and that's a big issue that I have with the game as well, is that in World, some people, and I can understand, I want to preface this, I can totally understand if there are people that are happy that this is not a thing in Wilds compared to World, but it's something that I really liked, where you would find footprints. Like when you're trying to get to a new monster, you have to find this monster. It doesn't just give it to you and you just go and ride to it. You have to like scan footprints. You have to scan markings. You have to like do these things that you would think a monster hunter would do to find the monster. And then like the scout flies will like be like, oh, we got to go this way. That's not a thing in this game anymore.
Right, because it's changing from, like, in the past games you'd have, I'm taking this mission to hunt this specific monster, and it's like a not a pre-configured level, because obviously you'd be going to the same areas time and time again, but it would be configured for tracking down that particular monster for that mission. Whereas now you can choose to hunt a specific monster, but it's because it's doing this like semi-open world style, right? Where it's like, yeah, this monster's just out in the wilds right now. You can go to them and you're going to start hunting them. As opposed to before where it's like the setup mission, right?
Well, it's kind of, so when you picked a mission in World, the when you load into that area, that map, the monster's going to be there somewhere.
Yes.
But the monsters also, whether you fight them for too long and you don't, kill it or capture it, or you just don't engage with it for a certain amount of time in general, they will leave the area. They'll like, and that still happens.
Right.
That still happens in this game. But it's more so that like how the story is kind of structured. I think it'll be best explained this way. How the story is structured is that you're basically like going to the next area or you're doing the next thing and you just happen to run into the next monster. It's not like hey, we're trying to figure this thing out, and then it eventually leads to you getting to the monster by checking the footprints, like checking the markings, things like that. Because when you played World, and because you have like the monster guide, right? And you have like this whole like biologist, I think, that used to be like at the base camp. And like the more that you fought the monster, the more you would learn about the monster. And in Wilds, that's not really a thing anymore. You have, you basically get, you're like, oh, we're doing this mission. You're writing your secret, and then you're going to run into you will run into the monster. It'll just happen. And then you just start fighting it. And that's it. Like, there's no like real sense of like,
Hunting.
when you think that, when you think of hunting, you think of like, you have to scout, you have to
Track.
you have to like, you have to track. Like, that's not really a thing in this game. And so it's just one of those really disappointing, like, it feels too, I don't want to say hand-holdy, but it just feels too guided. And it doesn't give me, and also on top of that, the monsters just in general feel easier. It feels like that they like lowered the overall difficulty of this game compared to World and Rise. That it just like, I think there was one, two, maybe three fights where I actually felt any sort of real sense of urgency in what I used to feel in every hunt in
Right.
Monster Hunter. And so it just, it's really like I think it goes into a bigger discussion about a lot of AAA games where like I personally feel like a lot of AAA games, major AAA games have been designed to be too guiding to the player. Like the player needs to be like pointed like I don't mind being pointed into a certain direction, but this feels like a lot more forced or a lot more like it doesn't feel that needed to be this guided that it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand like how those certain aspects may not be. Maybe this is a shift of like, hey, we're going to make a Monster Hunter game that is reminiscent of World, but is going to be more attractive to a mainstream gamer.
Sure. Well,
But I'm curious as to like how the Monster Hunter community, like the Monster Hunter diehards,
right.
are going to feel about this game because I feel like that people are going to be upset.
Yeah, because it sounds like a big change here is that it's trying to get you into the action combat as fast as possible. Like there's more emphasis on just getting into that immediately and keeping the downtime between that as low as possible.
Yeah, and the world design and like again, like just how the worlds are designed on top of that, it's not super interesting to explore as is comparatively to World. And so like there was just like this kind of explorative wonder that Monster Hunter World had where I was just like I would get to a new area and I'm like what monsters am I going to run into? Like what, that kind of sense of thing. But now in Wilds it's just all so streamlined that it's like, okay, I'm gonna start the next mission. Let's see what monster we're gonna run into next. Oh, okay, it's this monster. Cool. And on top of that, a lot of similar like design like not similarly designed, but like same like in the real world, in our world type things. Like there are two spider-like monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did we have to have two? Like even like arachnophobia aside,
Right.
did we really have to have two spider monsters? And there's like two octopus design monsters. I'm like, did we
Are
really
they
need to have two of these?
just to clarify? Like, so are you saying that there's like two monsters that are spider-like, or are you saying there's like two monsters that are effectively the same design but like a recolor?
Definitely not they're definitely not recolor.
Okay.
They're definitely like notably distinct monsters, but it's just like there's so many different animals that exist that I just feel like that they could have implemented different ones.
Sure.
That's kind of like where I'm at. But speaking of the recolor, there is like a creature where there's like a normal version and then like without getting the spoiler territory for story for those that will may or may not care down the line, there is like an alternative version of the same creature.
Yeah.
And so it's just like okay, that's interesting. But yeah, it's a really like I know I'm speaking really like negatively on this. I still think it's a great game. Like I'm sitting at like an 8 out of 10 right now.
Yeah. Well,
But
it's
I go ahead.
it sounds like one of the situations where ultimately you do really enjoy it, but you can't help but compare it a little bit to like what has been the series peak for you so far. And that always creates a bit of that dissonance, right? Of like, this is really good, but like, I know you've done things before that I like even more, and why did we stray from that, right? I am curious how, because I know one of the emphasis of this one going into that more ongoing open world setup. Because I mean, previous games had that exploration and going to places, but one of the things that's supposed to separate Wilds is how, it's one big area that is kind of always constantly going. It's not just like a specific mission you're going on that it's creating an instance for. And part of the fun with that is doing things like leading a monster to another monster's lair, or using the terrain in some kind of interesting way. I mean, did that stuff at least keep the combat feeling a little bit more fresh to you compared to past ones, or was it like that's a cool concept and then you never used it again, or like
Not really, but I will also say that like I think that once you understand what a Monster Hunter game is,
Sure.
um, in like how those regions are kind of like play like designed, or the type of thing of like, oh yeah, there's gonna be a fire type area, or oh yeah, there's gonna be a ice type area. Yeah, like so not really, because you kind of, if you're familiar with Monster Hunter, you're gonna kind of expect the type of areas that you end up seeing in this game.
Right.
You have like you have a desert area, you have a forest area, you have a, again, like a fire area and an ice based area, like, you know um and so, and then for the other areas, without saying specifics, it's like they're not anything special, I would say. Like they don't like stand out among like, oh, they saved the best for last or anything
Sure.
like that. I don't think so, no. But yeah, it's again, it's a game that I really really like, and I've like, I've played with other folks, like my buddy Khalif Adams over at Spawn on Me, and Jada, who works over at IGN, and Jada's, like, speaking with Jada specifically, like she's played the game, that series, longer than I have, and she kind of was agreed with like everything that I was kind of explaining my thoughts on
Sure.
at the time as well. I still think this is going to be like a well-reviewed game, but I was kind of in the mentality, wrongfully so, as most, as in all cases, that I was just like, there's no way that this game is going to be, not better than World, like, like,
Sure.
and
Well, and
and
with a game of this style too, right? It's you're not playing these for their individual plot lines or for
no,
like you're looking for how this one is moving this series forward, right? Like it
yeah,
is it's not necessarily always more of the same, but it's like you like this framework, but let's see how this one does it differently. And so when you always want that line to move forward, again, like you can be very happy at the end of the day with what the game is, but there's gonna be that part of you that's like, is this the way we want to keep pushing this forward? It sounds like this one not so much.
I mean, for me, yes, but I think for a mainstream audience, probably, like,
Mhm.
I think that, and I think that's why we keep kind of seeing a lot of games that are so guided, because that is what they like. People buy the games and realize like, oh, like this is the when that stuff happens and they buy the games more and like they get more sales, they're like, oh, we're doing something right, this is the direction we should go. Because
Sure.
at the end of the day, it's a business, and like that's just kind of how things play out. And then when it comes to the story, which we already know, but is already known from the beta, um the main character talks. Your character talks this time around. Like there's actual dialogue, and like they are a character. And before Wilds came out, when I played World and Rise, I'm just like, I really wish my character talked or had like just said stuff. And the more I played this game, the more I realized, no, that's not actually necessary. It's not bad, and I'm not saying it's bad. It just doesn't need to exist. It didn't add. It wasn't additive in any way. Where, but they do try to kind of make this crew of people that you are with throughout the game, kind of JRPG party vibes, but like not really.
Mm.
Because you are traveling with the same people more or less throughout the game, and they, while they don't like fight the monsters with you, they are like a part of the story, and da 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 da. It's fine, it's fine. It's definitely like the best Monster Hunter story thing that they've ever done. But I
Mhm.
also think that this is like the first time that they really tried to do something like what they're doing here. But it just didn't. But like the having the main character talk and like having dialogue with these characters like didn't really make that big attempt at telling a story notably like better or anything, or worse. It was just, it was fine.
Yeah, which I mean, like that is not necessarily a like foundational pillar for Monster Hunter,
No,
right? Like the story's always been there.
absolutely
Is
not.
like it is effectively how we're going to get you into the rhythm and flow of hunting monsters, and like eventually, it's really just the gameplay. But the story is how they kind of introduce you to the main ins and outs of the hunts.
Yes.
It's more or less tutorial dressing. Yeah, so I mean, like, cool. They're trying to do something more with it, but I could definitely see how, like, you know, improvement or not, that not really necessarily having like a heavy impact on people's enjoyment for the game or interest in it.
Yeah. Did you have any questions for me at this point?
Well, you know, I think one big thing we're dancing around a little bit is, you know, you talked a lot about the approach of tracking down a monster. We talked a little bit about the environmental exploration, but the combat itself. So you said
Yeah.
longbow was your focus. I am curious because you brought up longbow, but one of the things with this game is that you can have two weapons at a time.
Yes.
Did you experiment a lot with having two and like found yourself switching a lot? Were you just kind of like, no, I have my one, this works?
Yeah, I used my one. I really did. I think that it was just kind of nice being able to, especially when you fight a monster a second time and you find out like their weaknesses, right? So if I fought an enemy and it's like, oh, okay, they're weak to thunder, I'll bring my thunder bow, but then I'll also bring like just my general strongest bow, and let's see which one is more effective. And then like from there I'll decide, okay, this is the bow I'm going to use for the fight. Because like unless you're playing very specific weapons, you don't have to focus on like any particular body parts. Like if you're using the hammer, you're trying to bonk that head, right? Or if you have like a bladed weapon, which you know most are, you have the ability to cut off a tail, which is cool if you care about getting the tail. But outside of that, it's just kind of like you can just kind of use what you want. And I really like the bow in this game because they've added this kind of like focus mechanic, which is just like certain weapons. I can't speak for all of them because I didn't play all of them, everybody, but certain weapons like have this whole it's just basically like a new ability of sorts. And for the bow, what you can do is when they have the wounds with like the red spots,
Right.
you can I hold down right bumper and it'll kind of like pop up a giant circle, kind of like shot lock from Kingdom Hearts, if you're
Yeah, it's like an
Kingdom Hearts
auto-seeking arrow shot.
where
basically.
it's just where the spots will have like 3 pips, and once all the pips are full, you let go and it just like unleashes like a bunch of arrows on all of them. And if you are in the right area, like I think I honestly never figured this out for sure, so I might be wrong here, but either if you're in like the critical distance for the bow, which is like highlighted by like a little like a orangish yellow color, you'll do like another bow attack right after, and it'll just like kind of shoot through everything, and it'll like auto hit the wounds again. And so like that felt really satisfying. Like that felt so good, and that was something I was like, man, if this was in World, it'd be so good.
Right.
And so that was really satisfying. But then you also had like an ability where you could shoot a bow, like an arrow up in the air, and then arrows would rain down. And after, I don't know like what determines it, if it's like certain arrows that do it, because you have no control over it. But if it hits the enemies, that will add more kind of not cursors but targets for your focus attack where you like where you like lock onto the pips. So like, you know, you can kind of make your own, not make your own wounds per se, because it's not going to be as effective as like just the wounds in general. But if you see like a bunch of wounds, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and get like even more of these things on it, and then you unleash like 5 of these instead of like 2 or 3. You know, it just does more. So it's really fun and effective. It's definitely, and also you have like a perfect dodge if you time it right. So it's a really fun weapon to use. I don't really see myself like trying anything else, just because I like it and I enjoyed my experience with it. But it's cool. You know, I did test out the charge blade a little bit just because that's what I used in World, and also when I was playing with Ka, he was using the charge blade, and I was just like making sure that he knew everything about that weapon, because that's a very like that probably has the biggest like, not skill check, but the most like you have step by step to make it the most effective weapon.
Yeah. Like maybe a high skill floor, like it's like,
yeah, because
not the most
you have to
difficult
learn
to master,
about,
but like there's a baseline knowledge required that, to use
yeah,
it
because
right. Yeah.
you get the vials, and then you have to like charge your shield, and then you have to charge your sword, and then you need to charge your vials again, and then you can unleash like the super effective big attack. And so like I was showing him that a little bit, so I didn't notice anything majorly different about the charge blade, but I also admittedly didn't spend a whole lot of time with it. But yeah, the combat is good. The combat is like better than what it was in World, I would say. It just sucks that like kind of everything surrounding it isn't like on the same level for me.
Yeah. No, it definitely sounds like, again, like you were saying, a little more guided. It sounds like there's a much heavier emphasis on this one, getting you into fights as quickly as possible, like back to back to back. Like there's not going to be a ton of time tracking, not a ton, like there's your enemy, go find him, go kill him. Like just go fight. And once you're done, go fight the next thing. Like there's not as much downtime between, which
like
I could definitely see being like more appealing to someone who maybe doesn't dig the kind of slower bits between. But that is absolutely a shift.
But even, and I'm glad you actually said that, because even when you do the optional assignments where you're just trying to hunt a specific creature like outside of main story, when you leave the camp that you fly to, or you're already at for this specific hunt, that monster is right there. You don't even have to travel far. Yeah. It's just handed to you, and it's just like, what like we're supposed to be hunting, we're supposed to be scouting, we're supposed to be tracking, like what the I that's the thing that I just don't really get, is that like it's not that I don't get it, I do get it, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
It just doesn't, my brain doesn't like it.
Yeah, it's a choice that you understand the logic behind doing it for like a greater market, but you feel like it's kind of undoing a little bit of what made the series the series.
Exactly. And so that is those are like my main thoughts on it as of right now. So when I said earlier that it took me 16 hours to hit credits, that's basically like the halfway point, because like for those that don't know Monster Hunter, there's kind of like the low rank and then the high rank. And then the low rank is basically, you're still playing the game, but it is more or less, for lack of a better term, a glorified tutorial.
Yeah.
You are basically getting exposed to all the monsters, you're hunting all the monsters, you're learning how the game works, things like that. But then you get into high rank, and then the monsters are harder, and there's like your skill trees or your weapon trees for your upgrades and stuff get way more expansive, and things like that. That's where like a lot of people will tell you that's where a Monster Hunter game truly begins.
Right.
And that's the point I got up to. And I think, and there is more like story after the credits. Like you finish like kind of what they set up in the beginning, but there's more to go after. So it's not like once you hit credits, you're done with the game.
Sure. Yeah.
If this is your first time playing Monster Hunter, that and I want to clarify, like, I don't think that this is like a situation where you should start with World and not play this game if you've never played a Monster Hunter game before. But I also want you to know what Monster Hunter used to be and like what you would be missing if you started with this game too. I want to be clear about that.
That's so interesting to me too, because because I'm not like the biggest Monster Hunter head, but I've known a few people who have been, and I even know somewhere their stance was sort of like, yeah, World is cool, but like it's not. They changed it. Like this is not necessarily the direction I want, but they did make it more palatable. And so it sounds like this is a further step in that same direction in some ways. And I'm curious, like, how those players feel. People I need to track down and talk to about this now.
Yeah, I'm curious. Again, I'm really curious about what Monster Hunter fans are going to feel like, because I was planning on like checking out 3 and 4 Ultimate when they were back on the 3DS when those were a thing, but then World got announced. I'm like, I'll just hop in here.
Yeah.
And so I am kind of curious I'm super curious as to how people that have played this game for like a long time, like back on the PSP where it was like super prominent, about how they feel. Cause yeah, it definitely feels the most mainstream. Mm-hmm. It has to, considering like how it sounds like people that played pre-World thought that World was becoming more mainstream. This is like a notable jump as well. So yeah, I do want to play more. I do want to like continue playing, because especially playing with friends, super fun. When I was playing with Jada and Ka, like Jada pulled out her hunting horn, and her hunting horn was like a massive like bell, like your traditional like bell, but just as a weapon. So she's just casting all these playing all these melodies, playing all these songs, and it was really funny. It was really fun to see, and it was a really good time. I felt like this way before, even before this, but I think that Monster Hunter undoubtedly is the most fun when you play with other people, when you play with friends.
Yeah, I mean that's what
when you play by yourself, it's just not as interesting. But again, kind of going back to World, at least like the kind of exploration that World championed a bit, championed more comparatively, made me feel more like entertained. It kind of like helped cover up some of that lack of other people when I played in single player. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Monster Hunter Wild so far. I sound super down on it. It's not even that. Again, it's not that it's a bad game. It's just kind of like more of a it just feels unfortunate. It just feels like, I don't even want to say disappointing.
Yeah, no,
but it feels
it's that
weird.
situation again of like it's a good game. Like at the end of the day, it is a good game. It's just not necessarily you don't like it for the reasons you liked past ones, and there is a part. It's hard to not feel a little down about that, right? Like I compare this to a lot of what you're saying reminds me of my reactions to like Skyrim back in the day, where I was like, Skyrim is amazing. Skyrim is a great game, but it does a whole lot of things different from what it came from, where I'm like, I do like this as it is, but I don't like it for why I liked the other ones, and there's a part of me that's very sad about that. Like, I was looking forward to, A, and I got B instead. And B is good, but it's not A. And that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from you on this one a little bit.
Yeah, and because I really liked Rise as a follow-up to World, but I also knew that it wasn't like the follow-up to World.
Sure. Yeah,
it being like a Switch exclusive and like things like that. I was just like, okay, this is not like what I should expect from a World 2.
Right.
But Wilds was that, and it just didn't do what I was like hoping it to do. And like some of the ways that from what from what I got out of the beta, and again from what we saw at SGF, and admittedly, I didn't really watch a whole lot of the content that was shown, whether it be like trailers and stuff. I really like, unless it's a game that I'm like so ridiculously excited for, I don't really follow a lot of that stuff.
Sure, you'd rather
Because
go in with just open expectations. Yeah.
exactly. And so I don't know if this stuff was shown prior like that, but I just feel like what I saw of the game and the kind of like expectations that they put from what I saw, those weren't in actuality in the game itself when I played it. So yeah, it's a weird feeling. I think it's definitely gonna be in my top 10 this year. If it's not in my top 10 by this year, like I would be very shocked.
Right.
But I just can't help but like think about the things that I was hoping for that weren't in this game, or expected in this game that weren't. So yeah, were there any last questions that you had, Kevin, before we dip out?
I don't think so. I think you covered all the main. We talked about exploration, talked about combat. A little bit about story. Again, I'm not like the biggest Monster Hunter head, so I don't have like those very specific like, hold on, wait, how does this compare from before? But I think you covered like the main ground of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, I wanna you're planning on playing it when it comes out, right?
Yeah, I'm juggling a few too many games right now, so I don't know how much time I'm going to put into it, but I do plan to play it at launch. Yeah.
Yeah. As the year goes on, I'm very curious as to like your thoughts to it,
Sure.
and see if you kind of feel the same way, or if you feel differently. And like I said before, just like critics, like Monster Hunter community in general, like consensus, whether it be any of those three, I'm very curious as to how people are going to feel about this game when it comes out.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Alrighty. Well, everybody, pretty relatively short and sweet this time. I think a lot of what that game is pretty straightforward, right? You get your parts, you make your gear. There's not a whole lot of new or like materials, like you have different materials to create your stuff. Like I just want to make sure I'm kind of going over a little bit of everything before we say goodbye. But yeah, it's a fun game. It's a really fun game, and I think that people, especially when you play with your friends, you're gonna have a good time. Especially if you just want to be like, I just want to hop in, kill a monster, and get out. That's what this game is for sure. But if you're looking for more of like an exploration experience, of the traditional like tracking a monster, hunting it down type thing, I don't think that this game is going to have that for you. But I also know that Monster Hunter fans are going to play this game regardless. So
oh yeah, no, this is one of those games where day one is going to be explosive.
Yeah,
people
100%.
are not going to wait for reviews. Like people are going to dive in this right away, and we'll see what the mass reaction is to it. Compared to how you're feeling right now. But
yeah,
people will turn up for sure.
This game's going to sell gangbusters. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to our Monster Hunter Wilds review, and until next time, we'll catch you later.
Later.